Brad. So great to have you on the podcast here today. How are you?
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me, Jerry.
Let's dive right in. First off, right out of the gate, why did you want to start this company?
That's it's it's always an interesting question to ask. I think 8 years in, looking back, I think my answer would be different today than it was then. But I started the company really out of a need to solve a problem, but obviously there was other needs too, and part of that was I really wanted to create something of my own. I worked for a number of different startups, helping them scale, mostly in sales, and both of them helped lead them through acquisitions. So I got a bit of like the itch or the bug early on with watching something really grow from nothing. So, and in my earlier years, I actually started a couple small businesses, which I think got me into like the entrepreneurial world and world of like, hey, you can build something out of nothing, right? Like you don't need to attribute time to effort or time to money, as a lot of us think when we're younger, or just getting into the workforce. But going back to the beginning of this, when I met my co-founder, coincidentally, I was working for the previous company, solar startup out of Canada. We expanded into the U.S. and we got acquired by a big Fortune 200 company. And I saw a lot of opportunity. I was doing good at that company. I actually bought a condo in Toronto, moved into it, and I love the mission around renewables. I love the mission around decarbonization. I knew from the first time I got into that company, that actually the previous one to that this was something I wanted to focus on. Like this was what's going to make me get up in the morning and be happy about the work that I'm doing. So fast forward to sort of the inception of Parity. Yeah, the old company was going through an acquisition. Then I was moving on from that company, and I wanted to do something in the renewable space. So I was looking at a variety of different fields, but ultimately I had a letter slipped under my door that said your fees are going up by 18%. And it was my first real estate investment. I didn't know exactly how a building worked, so I dove into to the numbers. I got a hold of the budget, and I knew enough to be dangerous in HVAC technology, smart thermostat technology. And when I saw that energy accounted for 40% of our operating budget, I asked the question, what have we done to manage our energy? And the answer that I got was, pretty surprising to me. And that was, we've changed all our LED light bulbs. We've done everything we could do. That was really the reason I got started in Parity. And, I subsequently met my co-founder. He was working in buildings, doing some interesting things. And really this idea was formed out of, how do we manage energy in high-rise multifamily? Why hasn't that product been, built, or why hasn't that problem been solved?
Super interesting. And you and I first met at Blueprint, which was cool. It was great that was my first time going to the event. What is it about events like that get you excited? Is it being around kind of your peers, people that are building in a similar space? I'd love to see how that ties in, and that'll kind of tie into my next question. That's why I kind of switch focus to that.
Events like Blueprint are, like I think like anybody, I was told very young that networking is only one letter away from not working, and I always sort of laugh at that. But at Blueprint, it's more than just networking. It's being around your cohort and peers that are all trying to do something very similar in the space. Obviously attacking it from a lot of different angles, but also having the attention of the investors, right? The Blueprint is a big investor network. It's a place where people that are starting great companies and really bringing great technologies into the built environment space can meet investors, and you can trade notes and really understand like who's building what new technologies are coming out, and be around people that it gets you amped up, right? It's like it gets you psyched up, and you talk to a lot of people that are excited about the space, and that yeah, I'd say that's a big benefit of Blueprint.
I'd love to hear like how does like when you come back from that event, obviously you're probably tired, right? It's a lot of talking, it's a lot of networking, it's a lot of information that you're kind of taking in over the course of a few days. Do attending events like that, like when you get back and you start working like really deep focus again into the business, does it like change how you think about certain things with the business? Like, is there anything you ever hear at these events where it's like, oh, that's a new feature that we need to add based on this conversation? Or is it typically just kind of one of those things where it's good networking, it's good content. When you go back, you're just kind of back to what you're working on before.
Yeah, that's probably a question every company wants to ask when they spend the money on going to a trade show, right, or to a conference like that. I think getting out there is a big. It's if you're not doing it, it's a huge part of just being a founder, being in a business is being out there, being at those industry events, going to conferences, going to networking events. I've always found, over the years, the accumulation of info and small tidbits that I get from attending events like that have helped a lot. And you do find like these, sometimes there were like random nuggets of just like, oh wow, like an EV charging company, trying to put in EV chargers at a building, but there's only so much capacity at the building. So, but if they were able to unload or manage the HVAC systems, they could have more capacity to charge more cars. So, we started talking to a firm that, potentially around a partnership because of that. And that was something we never really would have known if we didn't hear somebody pitch. Like, if we could manage the load in the building, which is, the primary loads are coming from HVAC, we could, enable the building to have, better EV infrastructure for the residents. But other things, just understanding like what are the big pain points, both sort of macro and micro, from the ownership or management standpoint. I think those things are always evolving and changing depending on the economic environment that we're in. So yeah, I always find it useful. Every year that I've been, and I've been for the last 3 years, it's been a different tone. It's been a different tone from the founders, the people that are actually at the companies, operating, putting their technologies and services into buildings, and it's been a very different tone from investors. I'd say more recently, right? The investment landscape, as everybody knows, has been a lot more challenging. And on the founder side, the business landscape, if you're not a must-have, that's also been a lot more challenging. So, I think showing up to those events and understanding and being able to collaborate with some of your peers and also talk to some of your clients honestly and say, what can we do to, solve these new problems that you have, or what can we do to, increase our value proposition, right? Make it clearer. So I always find it's very important to be there. And, I think like anything along the way, you always pick up something, whether you use it immediately or you use it 5 years later, they are valuable.
I'd love to shift focus a little bit to kind of talk a little bit about going through your site. By the way, I love your site. I love the
Thanks.
video that plays on the site, and it kind of has the cool like tech highlights of the HVAC system. It's very aesthetically pleasing. So kudos to you and the team there.
Thank you.
You have this thing that says guaranteed utility cost savings and no upfront cost. Can you explain that for our audience?
Yeah, yeah, it's it is exactly what it says, which is something we take a lot of pride in. We're a sort of no BS, no hidden terms. We look at every building like, every building, if you look at it like an F1 car, I'm a car person. So if you look at every single building like an F1 car, either you have a 2024 F1 car, so the newest, latest, and greatest built technology, aero, suspension, engine, or maybe you have a 1982 F1 car. So the way that we approach, and that's sort of, that's how I look at the building landscape, right? Like you have brand new buildings with the best technology. You've got older buildings or slightly old buildings with that could have good technology, but also need to be upgraded if they want to, compete with a brand new F1 car. So we sort of look at the whole building landscape like that in multifamily and hospitality. And we say, okay, everybody has a vehicle, everybody has a car. Some of them might need more upgrades, so they might require a little more capital to get into the race. And other ones, you're just looking for the best driver. So that's really what Parity is we will take any car that's out there, we will make the necessary upgrades to put it in the race and compete with the best. And then we are the driver. So we are essentially guaranteeing you a win. So that's really how we look at each building and each customer is. It doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum of, technology. We will meet you where you're at, make the necessary upgrades, make sure we understand the dynamics of the engineering of the vehicle or the building, and then we will put you in the race and we will drive the car to make sure that you win the race. as long as we are driving that car, our hands are on the wheel and there's no one grabbing the wheel left and right, no one else is in control but us, we can guarantee the performance or we can guarantee the time that you get in that race. So when you look at how that applies in a building, if we are the driver in that building and we are operating the building within the parameters of what the machinery can handle and the equipment and the HVAC systems can handle, we can guarantee it's operated in a certain way without disrupting comfort and able to achieve the amount of money or electricity and gas savings that we mark. So again, that's the easiest way I can explain it, is as long as we're driving the car, we can make sure that you're getting the lap time that we want, and we guarantee it because again, we have a hold of the wheel.
So you mentioned this earlier, and I want to kind of circle back to it because this was something I was curious about before our conversation too. Is it, there's buildings of all ages. You talked about we kind of meet you where your tech's at, right? I'd love to talk a little bit more about that because how does the age of a building impact what you're able to like how you're able to do like I would be curious to learn more about that.
Yeah, it's a good question, and I think a common question when people initially hear about what we do. And I'd like to say it doesn't matter, but it matters. But it matters in different ways. Actually, some of the ways you wouldn't expect. Tend to be, buildings have on switches, right? Systems run in buildings. I use the analogy, if you ran a coffee maker 24/7, 365, so that the once or twice a day that you wanted a coffee, you put your cup under, hot coffee comes out. That's generally how, say, a hot water system in a building will operate. Now, if you understand the patterns of the people or the users in the building or the occupants of the building, and you understand, well, on average, right, people only want coffee twice a day. They want it between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. and then again at 12 till about 1:30. That's sort of common, right? So you can then, instead of setting someone up in the mechanical room to turn off the coffee maker, turn it back on, you can use that data and essentially use an algorithm to understand, okay, what are the indicators of people wanting coffee and not wanting coffee, right? And you take those data indicators, you feed it into a control algorithm. That control algorithm then can predict, okay, when those indicators are going up, the demand for coffee is going up. When those indicators are going down, the demand for coffee is going down. And then we can subsequently control the system associated with it. So I'm explaining that because it doesn't matter if the building is new or old, it still acts the same as that. Now, some new buildings, just like new F1 cars, I'll go back to that analogy, have the best tech, right? So if we go into a new building and it has the greatest control system and all the greatest equipment, that's still like just having a brand new F1 car, but not having the driver that can drive it, right? Versus an old building, you've got to, when did F1 start? I'm not actually even a big F1 fan. I associate this with cars, but you could have a 1980s F1 car. It's on its last legs. It needs a lot of upgrades, but it generally still operates the same. So if you put the right driver in it, you're going to do a lot better. So the age of the building, there's obviously there's specific nuances, like very old buildings, some of them only have heating. So there's only going to be so much that you can get out of a building's heating system versus air conditioning. A brand new building may have absolutely everything, but you have a lot more equipment to integrate with. There's different dynamics with the material that they're made out of. So it does range, but our clients exist from 100-year-old buildings to 1-year-old, and even some of them have the exact same amount of energy that we can save them.
What's next, Brad, for Parity that like really excites you as we kind of head into 2025?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. The how we started the business is obviously, how do we control the energy load in a building? And we want to control that because buildings produce, the energy that's consumed by buildings globally is produce 40% of CO2 emissions. So it's like, okay, how do we focus in on where there's a problem and a need? The ultimate goal of Parity is to be a grid interactive building provider. So we want to make buildings interact with the grid in smarter, more efficient, and more impactful ways. So the initial application of what we do is to control the major HVAC load in the building. What we're doing now is we're using that same control application to do things like automated demand response curtailment. So instead of having somebody run around a building, try to turn off machinery during demand response event, because we have control over all of the assets in the building that take part in a demand response program, we can automate the entire thing, obviously generating a lot more revenue, doing it a lot more, lot safer, and also monitoring the comfort of the residents during that time. Now, because we have that interaction with the grid, we can continue to go down that path. So we can look at, if your building's on a time of use rate, when are your peaks? When are your valleys? How do we peak shade? How do we optimize for when your energy is the lowest and you need the most energy? Or sorry, when your prices are when your energy is the highest and your prices are the highest. How do we optimize to make sure we can cut those peaks out and take advantage of the times when energy is low and be able to pre-cool, preheat, essentially, prepare the building while you have a lower cost of energy. And that would be through demand management. So it's very similar, looking at the makeup of the building, looking at the demands of the building, and then understanding when you're paying more or less for energy and being able to do demand management. So those are the types of things that we're now leveraging in a number of our clients' buildings. And those are the types of products and services that we're going to continue to launch as 2025 or 26 move forward.
I love it.
Yeah.
I want to thank you so much for joining us here on the podcast here today, telling us more about Parity. And I love the car analogies. Pretty cool stuff. Thank you so much for joining me here today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Jared.